Licensed practical nurses and licensed vocational nurses provide basic medical care. In this video, we're going to help you answer the question, should you become a licensed practical nurse or a licensed vocational nurse in 2020? We're going to go over salaries, the job market, and the latest trends. Coming up. Hey everyone, Stephen Hack here with CareerWatch, where I help you with your career search. If you end up enjoying the video, hit that like button to support the channel. All the charts and graphs used in this video are available at my blog at www.careerwatch.co/blog/licensed nurse. So licensed practical and licensed vocational nurses have a number of roles and responsibilities. Some of these include monitoring patients' health, such as checking blood pressure, heartbeats, and temperature, administering basic patient care such as changing bandages, helping patients bathe and dress, updating records of a patient's health, reporting patient status to doctors and nurses, and collecting samples for lab work. There's a lot of overlap between licensed practical nurses or Lpns and licensed vocational nurses, Lvns, and a lot of these are dependent on the state at which they work. They're licensed and regulated very differently based off the state. So let's get into the salary statistics. This data is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It doesn't include overtime and other benefits. Overtime can be a big part of compensation for licensed practical and licensed vocational nurses. We'll get into that a little bit later in the video. So these are base salaries over time. The government has been collecting data on Lpns and Lvns over 2 decades. In 1909, the average base salary was $29,020. This rose to $48,500 in 2019 as a base salary. So nationally, from 1999 to 2019, there has been a growth of about $19,440 for the average base salary for Lpns and Lvns. This comes out to an average yearly wage growth of about $974 per year. So given this data, we can estimate that the average base salary in 2020 for Lpns and Lvns would be $49,427. Regarding overtime, about 50% of Lpns work overtime and 50% do not work overtime. Regarding this overtime, about 12% of it is mandatory, which people hate. People hate being forced to work mandatory overtime. About 57% is voluntary. So the overwhelming amount of overtime worked is voluntary. Regarding overtime, typically how it works is hours worked over 36 or 40 hours, depending on the shifts, would get time and a half, and at a certain point, depending on the state, double time kicks in, which can definitely add up to a lot. Regarding these wages, we can actually plot them 10 years into the future. So by 2029, if we're going to use that yearly wage growth number, Lpns and Lvns on average would be making around $58,000 as a base salary. Another thing to keep in mind is geography matters for the compensation of Lpns and Lvns. There's actually a $26,000 difference between the lowest paying state on average and the highest paying state. The lowest paying state is the state of West Virginia with an average base salary of $37,500, and the highest paying state is the state of Alaska, where the average base salary is $64,000 per year. For the top 7 and the top lowest paying states, either check my description below or go to my blog post on licensed nurses. Another thing to consider is the salary breakdown of Lpns and Lvns. The 10th percentile, this would be kind of like a starting salary, probably for many Lpns and Lvns, is around $35,000 per year as a base salary. The top 10%, people with lots of experience most likely, make around $63,000. So there's actually a $28,000 difference between the 10th percentile and the 90th percentile. Work environment also plays a role in the compensation of Lpns and Lvns. Nursing and residential care facilities tend to pay the most amount of money with the average base salary of around $48,000, and doctors' offices, interestingly, tend to pay the least with an average base salary of around $44,000. So there's about a $5,000 difference between the highest paying work environment and the lowest paying work environment. So let's compare these wages to similar occupations. Obviously, Lpns and Lvns are going to get out-earned by nurse practitioners and registered nurses. You already knew that. The education requirements to become an Lpn and Lvn are much less than to become a nurse practitioner or a registered nurse. I'll get into the educational requirements a little bit later in the video. By average base salary, Lpns and Lvns are out-earned by nurse practitioners, occupational therapy assistants, registered nurses. But they do tend to out-earn medical assistants, who on average make around $35,000 per year. So that covers compensation. What is the job market like for LPNs and LVNs? Is this a growing field or is it a shrinking field? Well, the government has about 2 decades of employment data for LPNs and LVNs. In 1999, there was about 688,000 jobs. By 2019, there was about 697,000 jobs. So from 1999 to 2019, there was a growth of about 9,000 jobs for LPNs and LVNs. So over the past 2 decades, there has been very limited job growth for LPNs and LVNs. On the other hand, registered nurses have seen very explosive job growth. I actually have a video on registered nurses. Feel free to check it out. Despite the past 2 decades of somewhat stagnant job growth for LPNs and LVNs, the government is predicting a 9% growth in the number of jobs for this occupation. This is kind of what it would look like. By 2029, they are expecting 787,000 jobs, which would be a vastly different trend than what we've seen over the past 20 years. So we'll see what happens. This occupation is expected to grow pretty fast despite the past 2 decades. So what kind of education is required to become an LPN or LVN? Well, every LPN and LVN must be licensed by the state that they choose to work in. They have to complete an approved educational program at either a technical school, community college, high school, or a hospital. There are also programs to transition people in this occupation towards becoming an RN. The government actually surveyed the education of LPNs and LVNs, and this is what they found. They found that 2% had less than a high school diploma, 23% had a high school diploma or equivalent, 53% had some college, 17% an associate's degree, 4% a bachelor's degree, and 1% a master's degree. So you definitely don't need higher education to enter into this occupation. So what kind of people actually become LPNs and LVNs? Well, if you don't know what your Holland codes yet, definitely do a free RIASEC assessment. And this will give you 6 different codes, and it'll kind of give you an idea of where your interests lie. With LPNs and LVNs, they tend to score really high in the social theme and the realistic theme, which makes complete sense. You have to be pretty social to become a nurse. People that score high in the social theme tend to describe themselves as helpful, cooperative, kind, cheerful, and patient. And they are motivated by helping, empowering, and instructing others. People that score high in the realistic theme tend to describe themselves as reliable, practical, thrifty, persistent, reserved, and self-reliant. And they are motivated by building, repairing, being outdoors, and kind of working with their hands. So as you can see, entering into this occupation has its pros and cons. The job market is somewhat stagnant. It has not been growing over the past 20 years, especially relative to registered nurses who have added almost 1 million jobs over the past 20 years. But the cost of getting in is very low. Some people just get in straight from a high school program, but just keep in mind that you have to be licensed in the state that you want to work in. Another big advantage is overtime. A lot of LPNs and LVNs can work a lot of overtime and really boost their pay. Are you an LPN or LVN? What do you like about this occupation and what do you dislike about this occupation? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.